The narrative begins with a man named James driving rapidly along a long and seemingly empty highway. He is distracted and does not notice the danger ahead until it is almost too late, because within seconds he nearly collides head-on with a truck that suddenly appears in his path. In the midst of all this unexpected chaos, a young woman abruptly appears at the worst possible point on the road. The car forces her to jump aside to avoid being hit, and in that sudden movement, her suitcases are thrown to the ground, scattering and ruining her personal belongings. To make the situation even worse, she misses the bus that had just stopped, being completely abandoned as the vehicle leaves without waiting. The young woman had been planning to move to the big city in search of a new life, but the destroyed state of her suitcases prevents this from happening. Now, with no alternatives, she has only the option of returning to Silent Hill, the place where she lives. James realizes that he is responsible for the entire situation and feels deeply terrible. He knows the fault is entirely his. Overcome with remorse, he offers to help her, saying that he can give her a ride wherever she needs to go. The young woman immediately shows hesitation and does not trust him, keeping her distance and remaining cautious, but James insists, stating that he will stay there watching until he is sure she will be safe, even if she decides not to accept his help. Faced with his persistence and apparent genuine concern, she eventually gives in. As James begins to help her gather and organize the suitcases, a strong and sudden wind passes through the area, and the air becomes strange, heavy, and uncomfortable. The young woman named Mary explains that this always happens when someone approaches Silent Hill, almost as if the place itself were conscious and welcoming people in its own way. However, at the exact moment when the tension grows and something seems about to happen, the scene abruptly changes, revealing that all of this was only in James's mind. He was not on the road, but sitting in a dark bar, completely drunk. His phone rings repeatedly without stopping, but he ignores the calls. His condition is so miserable that the staff quickly realize he can barely remain standing. James argues aggressively and gets into a physical confrontation with the security guards while the calls continue to come in, until they overpower him, drag him out of the bar, and throw him mercilessly beside the trash. The phone continues ringing insistently until he finally answers. On the other end of the line is his psychologist, who harshly scolds him for being in such a deplorable state. She states that they have an appointment scheduled for the following day and warns him not to miss it. Eventually, he arrives home completely exhausted, physically and emotionally destroyed. Upon entering, he finds a letter from Mary. In the letter, she states that something terrible happened and that she urgently needs him. Without thinking twice, James decides to go immediately to Silent Hill. He does not hesitate, even under heavy rain that perfectly reflects his state of mind. He drives off with his thoughts completely fixated on Mary, believing that she is the woman of his life and determined to find her. As he drives, his thoughts remain obsessively fixed on her until he ends up falling asleep at the wheel. Sometime later, James awakens confused and realizes that he is parked near a public restroom. He looks at himself in the mirror, visibly tired, worn down and consumed by grief, and rereads Mary's letter as if trying to convince himself that it is real. He remembers the good moments he lived with her in Silent Hill, while everyone around him insists that he should let her go and move on with his life. Still, James cannot accept this, because he deeply believes that Mary still needs him. He continues his journey deeper and deeper into Silent Hill, and along the way, meets a young woman named Angela. She asks for help carrying a heavy bag, and they walk together for a stretch. Angela comments that it has been raining a lot lately, and when James asks if she has seen Mary, she warns him that he will not find her, saying that when the water becomes contaminated, everyone leaves, because it always brings bad things. Angela formally introduces herself and offers to wait for him if he does not find who he is looking for. As James continues forward, he begins to remember every moment he shared with Mary in that place, when everything was different, when Silent Hill still seemed warm, alive, and welcoming. He recalls the promises he made to her, and remembers telling her that one day they would move together to Silent Hill. Mary, however, always feared that he might discover something about her that could drive him away. James always reassured her, stating that nothing could change what he felt for her. Now, as he walks deeper into the city, he feels a growing and suffocating fear. The city is dark, abandoned, filled with ruined buildings and garbage scattered everywhere. seeming like a place that does not desire anyone's presence. Even so, James does not stop and continues forward. He finds a warning sign indicating danger ahead, but decides to ignore it, choosing to follow a narrow and oppressive alley. He shouts to see if there is anyone there, but receives no response. Suddenly, he hears music coming from a nearby tunnel. Following the sound, he finds a radio beside a person lying on the ground, covered by a sheet. When James approaches to pull the sheet away, strange noises fill the air, and the person grabs him, warning him not to go any further, stating that there are cursed things in that city. At that moment, James's phone rings again. It is his psychologist, visibly irritated that he missed the appointment. James states that he is in Silent Hill and that something terrible is happening, but she does not believe him and orders him to return immediately. Frustrated and confused, James hangs up and notices a light on in a nearby shop. He enters hoping to find something useful, and inside, memories of Mary hit him with crushing force. He remembers when Mary introduced him to the people of Silent Hill, who told him that her family helped build the city and claimed that one day James would also find his place there. Suddenly, the memory is interrupted by a piercing scream. James turns and sees the man who had warned him earlier, now with a burned and unrecognizable body. Before he can react, a deformed creature lunges at him, one of the city's twisted monsters known as a glued arm. James fights desperately for his life and manages to drive the creature away, causing it to disappear into the pipes, but the danger does not end there. The radio crackles again and transmits a sinister warning, as if the city itself were cautioning James about the horrors still to come. As night falls, more creatures emerge from the shadows and James becomes surrounded. Swarms of cockroaches rise from the ground and begin to follow him. He runs in pure panic, his flashlight shaking violently in his hand as he tries to escape, until he stumbles and falls hard to the ground. As he tries to get up, he glimpses countless grotesque creatures, bodies twisted into impossible forms, watching him and pursuing him from all directions. In total desperation, James finds refuge in a house, slamming the door behind him. For now, he is safe, but the terror is far from over. Inside the house, James realizes that he is in Mary's old home, a painful and disturbing reminder of the past. Suddenly, he hears Mary's voice calling him, but fear drives him to continue exploring. In a room, James finds a videotape dated June 2017. As he watches it, his mind begins to shatter and the pain becomes unbearable. He calls his psychologist, admitting that he cannot take it anymore, even though he still feels Mary's constant presence. Just before he can say anything else, the phone completely dies. The psychologist continues calling without getting an answer, and overcome by panic, calls for help, warning that James is in serious danger. Meanwhile, James continues wandering through the house, and with every step the environment becomes more disturbing. The atmosphere grows dense, oppressive, and suffocating, as if an invisible presence were constantly watching him. Without warning, another memory overtakes him. He remembers his first visit with Mary to that place, when the people of the city spoke to him in a serious tone, saying that love is complex, and that even when one loves deeply, it is necessary to remain aware. A sudden sound interrupts the conversation, and immediately, the residents sense something strange. Without saying a word, they step away, leaving the couple completely alone. When they are alone, James comments on how strange it was that so many people appeared suddenly. Mary gently explains that they were not strangers, but her family, people who never abandoned her after her father's death. She then shows James a portrait revealing the image of her father. The story returns to the present with the sound of a nauseating noise. James encounters a man who lets out a harsh and bitter laugh and asks why James is not sick like everyone else. He introduces himself as Eddie and explains what happened in Silent Hill, the contamination, the endless rain, and the strange creatures that destroyed the city. Eddie lifts his shirt to show his wounds as proof of the horrors he faced. Suddenly, they hear a baby crying and follow the sound to a young girl named Laura holding a baby. James introduces himself and tries to leave with her, but Eddie panics and runs away, leaving James alone. At that moment, Pyramid Head, the terrifying figure James fears, appears and slowly advances toward him. James runs for his life, passing by a mannequin that for an instant makes him believe he is seeing Mary. The illusion shatters when the mannequin transforms into a horrifying creature that pursues him. James barely manages to hide in a closet while Pyramid Head destroys the creature. The environment grows silent, but James knows he is not safe. The door slowly opens and suddenly, a powerful explosion shakes the entire building, freezing everything. After a long silence, James is still alive, hidden inside the closet, trembling but unharmed. When he finally emerges, he finds Angela, visibly disturbed and furious. She scolds him for coming there and reminds him that she warned him, saying that the place hides terrible secrets, truths that should never be discovered, because some are too dark for anyone to bear. She states that nothing he does will be enough to save her, and declares that Silent Hill is worse than hell. Overcome by fear, James runs aimlessly, not knowing where he is going, simply running. Along the way, he encounters Laura, who shows him a doll and says it was a gift from Mary. Hearing Mary's name makes James feel closer to her than ever. Suddenly, a noise interrupts them. Laura runs away, and James chases after her desperately. She leads him through winding corridors like a true labyrinth, and then disappears without warning, leaving him trapped. A young woman appears and speaks calmly, explaining how he can leave that place. James tells her that Mary is in the hospital. The woman states that she will help him find her, and that they will also look for Laura. Together they move forward, and shortly afterward, deformed creatures approach. They take shelter and manage to escape narrowly. When they reach the street, James is flooded with memories. He remembers when the people Mary called family took her to a strange place, and how he secretly followed them. They led Mary to a hidden door that descended deep underground into a huge basement. Holding a flashlight, James descended the stairs, sinking into darkness, not knowing what awaited him. The woman's voice brings him back to the present, saying that the hospital is nearby. Inside, she finds a radio with recordings of Mary's voice, and then reveals something disturbing. Years earlier, a religious group formed by veterans was founded by a man named Joshua. After Joshua's death, the group began to venerate him as a prophet, and his daughter is exactly the person they are looking for. James is pulled back into memories again and remembers descending into that basement where he witnessed the construction of a strange sanctuary filled with disturbing symbols. They gave Mary something to drink and then carried out a terrifying ritual, covering her in blood as if she were an offering. The memory shatters when the sound that had been following them returns. Panic spreads and they flee, being led into a room filled with nurses standing completely still. Their bodies are twisted into unnatural positions, like lifeless dolls. The silence is unbearable until suddenly a nurse lying on a gurney begins repeatedly banging on the metal. This sound awakens the others, and slowly, one by one, the nurses come to life and begin to pursue them, moving rigidly yet relentlessly. James and the woman run to an elevator, and while waiting for the doors to close, James turns to face the creatures, buying time for his companion to enter and be safe. However, one nurse slips inside at the last second and attacks her, leaving her severely injured. The elevator begins to move and then abruptly stops, becoming stuck. James forces the doors open and desperately tries to stop the bleeding with an improvised bandage, but he cannot because the wound is far too deep. With a trembling voice, she says that she knows why he looks at her that way. She looks exactly like Mary. James begs her to stay there while he goes to look for Mary. Before he leaves, she makes him promise something. If he does not find Mary, they will leave Silent Hill together and never return. James agrees and walks away, feeling the crushing weight of the promise on his shoulders. In the corridor, James encounters Laura again. She shows him her doll, which now appears like a real and living baby. Laura says that she is sad because no one loved her, just as no one loved Mary, and then insists that James go find her, warning that time is running out. She leads him to room 318 and leaves him there, closing the door behind him. James enters and comes face to face with a grotesque creature with 4 arms. The monster grabs him easily, completely immobilizing him. James struggles but cannot free himself, and as he resists, Laura's voice echoes cold and distant, saying that he should only return when he is truly ready. James suddenly awakens, and everything seems to be over. He finds himself in a hospital in Silent Hill, where the environment is cold, silent, and unreal. Soon, his therapist arrives and calmly tells him the truth James has been avoiding for a long time. He needs to let her go because Mary died months ago and nothing he does can change that. James dreams again and sees himself before Mary, saying that he saw everything, that he followed her into the basement and witnessed what they did to her. He asks her to leave with him, cross the door and escape. Mary looks at him with sadness and says that she knows he is afraid, reminding him of the day he found her trying to flee, when she warned him that there were secrets he should not discover. Even so, he promised that none of it would matter. However, when the moment came, he turned away and left her behind. As he walks away, everyone watches through the windows, silent and motionless, like judges. The psychologist explains that Mary died some time after the end of the relationship, and that James was never able to accept it. When she died, he not only lost her, but also lost control of his own reality, and his mind shattered along with his grief. The next day, James speaks with his doctor, and in a low voice, admits that he wishes he had not disappointed her. He is then left alone, looking out the window, and at that moment reality begins to fracture again. James finds himself back in the ruined hospital of Silent Hill, and beside him is the blonde woman who claims not to have found Mary, and reminds him of the promise that if he did not find her, they would leave together. She says that it is time to go and finally introduces herself, revealing that her name is Maria. Maria states that they can leave immediately, but also offers another choice to remain there together, just the two of them, if that is truly what he desires. James now faces his final decision between painful truth and comforting illusion. He takes his flashlight and decides to look for Mary one last time, advancing with determination even as extreme exhaustion and mental confusion consume him. Maria stays close, begging him to stop, to turn back and not go any further, but James does not listen. They enter an elevator, and as it descends, Maria warns him not to enter the corridors. James ignores her and continues. As he walks through the corridor, he notices portraits aligned on the walls, whose faces seem to stare at him and judge him as he moves forward. Maria follows him, pleading with an increasingly desperate voice for him to leave with her and abandon that place. Finally, James explodes, shouting that Mary is not dead and that Maria does not even exist. He covers his ears, refusing to hear anything, and remains standing still, waiting for Pyramid Head to appear and put an end to everything. The presence of Pyramid Head is felt, cold and implacable. After that, James is shown drawing incessantly, completely disconnected from reality. His mind continues to fragment until he falls into the water, and exhausted remains there while before him fire rises. Through the flames he sees Laura, who tells him that the time has come to face her, and asks him to say Mary's full name. Lost in the fog of his memories, James remembers the name on Mary's grave and speaks it aloud. Laura nods and says that the moment has arrived. James walks through a corridor engulfed in flames and enters a room where he finds Angela, who admits that she was never able to escape and that she always feels as if someone is touching her. Hands begin to emerge from the bed, grabbing her repeatedly. James tries to help her, but it is useless, and in the end both fall together onto the bed, being swallowed by darkness. James proceeds to a hostile place where the heat is unbearable and even the air seems to burn. There he comes face to face with a horrible monster that wears Mary's face. Upon seeing it, James collapses, begging forgiveness through tears. The creature explodes into flames, writhing and screaming until only a melted and horrendous body remains. Shattered, James returns to the corridors of fire, and through the flames, sees a familiar shape resembling Mary. Without hesitation, he follows it deeper into the hell of Silent Hill. But no one awaits him, only fire and ashes remain. At last, James enters a room where, in the center, there is a bed with a body covered by a sheet. As he approaches, he finally understands that it is Mary. He hears his psychologist's voice in his mind, repeating that Mary is dead and that he needs to let her go. James is left alone with the truth he has been fleeing, while memories return of the last time he saw her, and the world turns white, calm and silent, as if time had stopped. Before Mary, James asks for forgiveness, saying that even if everything had been different, she would still have fallen ill because her father slowly poisoned her throughout her life, and no one could have prevented that. Desperate, James asks how he can help her. Mary looks at him with profound sadness and says that he already knows the answer, stating that she lived her entire life in pain and fear, and that now all she wants is to be free. She asks him to end her life, saying that she can no longer endure the suffering. Even in the hell of Silent Hill, James finally lets her go, not as an escape, but as an act of true love. He accepts the truth and frees what kept him bound, coming to remember Mary as she truly was, not as pain or guilt, but as the woman with whom he shared real moments, every laugh, every silent instant, every peaceful memory. In this final vision, Mary is free and forgives him, but James knows that this is not enough, because even if Mary forgives him, he will never be able to forgive himself. He accepts his fear and his weakness, recognizing that he failed when she needed him most. Carrying Mary's body, James carefully places her in the passenger seat of a car, and without tears or words, drives toward the sea. Upon reaching the edge, he does not hesitate and drives directly into the water. As the car slowly sinks, James whispers a final promise that this time he will not run away. Time then fractures and the story returns to the moment they first met. Everything begins again, but something is different, because James is no longer the same. He now understands, accepts, and this time they move forward together, not toward Silent Hill, but toward a new beginning.